Okay, so the topics that we are going to discuss tonight. First of all, what assets does EPF invest in? The retirement fund invests our future savings not only locally but internationally as well. But for today's purposes, we will dive deep into the local stocks that EPF invests in. Okay. Next up, the ringgit rallies to an 8-year high versus the Japanese yen. Is it the right time to go to Japan or not? Well, I'll let you guys decide it for yourself. And I'll tell you guys what is the reason for the weakening yen. Finally, US dollar recovers. This one is a bit expected, like the retracement. Plus, there is some comments from the Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. He said some stuff, and the US dollar made a bit of a comeback. So this and more in our weekly analysis, as usual, not financial or legal advice. Right, let's dive right into the first topic of the night. This is EPF's second quarter results for this year. Okay, and the investment income totaled to 18.03 billion, and the majority of the income was allocated into equities, 43%, and fixed income instruments, 46%. So bear in mind, this does not mean local stocks, like stocks in the Bursa market. It's split between local and international stocks as well, like US stocks, China stocks. Same case for the fixed income instruments. It's not just Malaysian government securities, but also international bonds. And if you want to know EPF's total assets, that's as of June 2023, it stood at 1.08 trillion. Yeah, trillion with a T. Not sure if you guys know about that, but a lot of responsibility is resting on their shoulders. They're managing a lot of money. Okay, so almost 40% of the 1 over trillion is invested in overseas investments, and the remaining percentage is invested locally. So obviously, EPF does not has a lot of say. They have a lot of say in the local stock market as well as the local market in general, right? And we take a look at the top equity holdings of EPF by issued shares. So some people may take a look at this list and have a lot of misconception. They may say that, oh, EPF's stock portfolio consists of 65.39% MBSB, right? 41.39% RHB and 35.85% Malaysian Resources Corp. But if you add up the first three percentages, right, it's already over 100%. So it doesn't really make sense. Rather, the right term is EPF owns 65.39% of MBSB, 41.39% of RHB, so on and so forth. Okay, and within this list itself, which is as of 2021, you'll be able to see the major companies as well. Tenaga Nasional Berhad, which is the fourth largest company in Malaysia, EPF has a 18% stake in it. Meanwhile, Maybank, the largest company in Malaysia, EPF has about a 14% stake in it. And there are various ways that you can get information about this, not just from EPF. Okay, you can also search it through the KLSE app, and in that case, you will have a much more detailed result. Okay, so download the app, KLSE app, and go to the search bar, search for the specific stock, in this case, Maybank, and click on announcements. Okay, as long as you see Employees Provident Fund, you'll be able to track EPF's movements when they sell the specific stock, when they acquire more. Yeah, there's a lot of details over here. And as of Friday, EPF holds about 1.6 billion Maybank shares with a direct interest of 13.485%. So if you take these units over here and you multiply it by the current share price 9.11, you will have EPF's valuation in that particular stock. Okay, so with this figure in mind, let's take a look at the top 10 largest and most valuable companies in Malaysia by their market cap. So this is not EPF Holdings. That one is in the next slide. So Maybank, obviously the largest company, 107.09 billion. Public Bank, 80.36 billion. CIMB Bank, third place, almost 60 billion ringgit. Tenaga Nasional, 58 billion ringgit. Petronas Chemicals, almost 58 billion ringgit. And the rest of the list you guys can refer over here. But what are EPF's stakes in each of these particular assets or the top 10 largest and most valuable companies in Malaysia? So let's go through the first five. Maybank, EPF holds about 13.49%. I rounded up just now already, with a valuation of 14.70 billion. Meanwhile, Public Bank, 15.68% EPF owns, valuation 12.66 billion. CIMB Bank, third place, 15.08%, valuation 9.25 billion. Tenaga Nasional, 16.54% valuation of almost 9.5 billion. Fifth place, 11.66% Petronas Chemicals with a valuation of 6.71 billion. And when you take a look at this list, right? So this is sorted by market cap, okay? And you'll be able to see EPF's trends as well. Okay, they tend to invest more in larger, bigger firms, and the investment amount gradually decreases. Okay, so to help you visualize things more easily, I will send it to the general chat later as well. This chart over here, our patrons already have this uh, graph over here, so you may want to consider joining our Patreon membership. Anyway, the total investment value in the top 20 largest and most valuable companies in Malaysia by EPF amounted to 111.59 billion. And the majority of the money goes into financial services such as Maybank, 13%, Public Bank, 11%, CIMB, 8%, RHB, 9%. So these four banking stocks, right, already make up 30 to 40% of EPF's total investment value in the top 20 largest companies in Malaysia. So at the end of the day, hopefully this gives you a good idea as to how you want to kind of structure your local stock portfolio if you've been playing local stocks recently, right? But by no means this is considered financial advice. Huh? And obviously EPF's allocation over here is catered towards a more lower risk type of portfolio. So you guys can decide for yourself how you want to change your specific allocations. Okay, moving on. Let's talk about the US dollar versus the Malaysian ringgit. Yeah, it's not been a very good year for the Malaysian ringgit. Yeah, you don't say, right? 2 to 3 weeks ago, it depreciated to a 25-year low of about 4.79, then suddenly made quite a comeback, strengthened about 3 to 4% against the US dollar. We talked about it last 2 weeks as well. It's because of the Federal Reserve temporarily pausing interest rate hikes for the second consecutive time, yeah, which led investors to believe that the US Federal Reserve is done hiking interest rates. But what we are seeing this week is that suddenly US dollar is making quite a bit of a comeback. And this is not just evident in the ringgit's weakness, but rather it's more towards dollar strength. Because if I layer the dollar index on top of the USD MYR pair, you'll be able to see that the strength that came from the USD MYR pair over here comes from dollar strength. Okay, so why did the US dollar strengthen this week? Well, it's because of something the Fed chairman said, Jerome Powell said something, the markets reacted to it. It's always this case. Okay, so we got to get used to this. And on Thursday, in the International Monetary Fund meeting, Jerome Powell said that, hey, the US is probably not done hiking interest rates yet because inflation is still well above our target goal. I know we paused 2 times previously already, but that doesn't mean we may continue to pause in the future. And boom, that just led to a comeback in the US dollar and hence the strength in the USD MYR pair. So enough with that. Let's talk about something more interesting, the Japanese yen. Okay, Malaysian ringgit versus Japanese yen currently at an 8-year high, hit it on Wednesday. And since January 2022, the Malaysian ringgit has rallied by an astonishing 16.92% versus the Japanese yen. Okay, so it may just be a good time to go to Japan. I converted some money into Japanese yen last week because I'm planning to go for a trip somewhere in April next year. Hopefully it works out. But let's stick to the points over here. The yen's weakness is not only against the ringgit, by the way. It's versus all the currencies, especially major currencies. Take a look at yen versus US dollar, similar downtrend. Yen versus British pound, also similar downtrend. So these two currencies alone, right? The yen has depreciated by about 20 to 30% in the past 2 years. Okay, and obviously this is something related to the yen itself, and this is due to interest rates. So I did kind of talked about it some time ago. If you guys joined our sessions previously, why the Malaysian ringgit is weak is because of Malaysia's interest rates versus the United States interest rates. And in this case, the Bank of Japan, yeah, the Central Bank of Japan, they have decided to maintain ultra low interest rates. Yeah, compared to other central banks globally, like the US and UK, they have been raising interest rates aggressively. And Malaysia as well, right? Bank Negara Malaysia raised from 1.75 to 3% in less than 2 years. Meanwhile, the Japanese yen, they've decided to stay the course, okay, which is why the yen has been so weak in the recent 2 years. And probably your next question is, Just how low is Japan's interest rates? Well, take a look at it yourself. It's in a negative territory, negative 0.1%. And throughout the COVID pandemic, right, they have never budged. They refuse to raise interest rates. And the last time that they raised interest rates was during the '07 and '08 financial crisis. And that's just by a minuscule amount. If you compare it to the Federal Reserve and Bank Negara Malaysia, like what I said just now, right? US Federal Reserve, the COVID pandemic from 0.25%, they hiked all the way to 5.5% in a span of less than 2 years. Okay? Meanwhile, Bank Negara Malaysia, 1.75 to 3.0%. So this really kind of explains why the yen has been so weak recently. And probably your next question is, okay, I get it now why the yen is so weak, but why is Japan forced to keep interest rates low? Well, this figure pretty much explains itself. This is the GDP by country, yeah? And the US, a first world country, you can see the GDP is kind of exponential growth. Malaysia, us being a second world country, okay, we're a bit behind, emerging market, right? Our GDP growth is also kind of exponential. But you take a look at Japan, it's quite a scary sight. Yeah, their GDP has been sluggish for almost 30 years. And the Bank of Japan, because of this specific reason, they refuse to raise interest rates. In fact, they have been reducing them as much as possible. Because if they raise interest rates, it's going to raise borrowing costs, it's going to discourage people to spend money, yeah, encourage people to save more. And at the end of the day, it will decline Japan's growth, which has been, stagnant for almost 30 years now. Now, as to why Japan's economy has been stagnant for the past 30 years, that one is a whole nother can of worms. We'll leave it for a session for another day. I'm going to bring some financial experts in, but we'll talk about that eventually. Okay, so these are the reasons why the Japanese yen has been so weak, and we also touched upon interest rates, right? And by the way, this is a real example. Banks in Japan, they are currently offering 0.13% for fixed deposits. Yeah, I'm not lying. You can check it out yourself. Meanwhile, banks in the US, they are offering 4, 5, or even 6% for FDs. So as an investor, as a normal investor, where would you place your money? Now, obviously, you will place it into the US dollar, okay? So a similar case can be explained for the Malaysian ringgit's weakness as well. Why has the ringgit been weakening so much against the US dollar in the past 2 years? Well, Malaysian Central Bank or Malaysian banks in particular, for fixed deposits, we are offering 3.5 to 4% per annum, but it's obviously nothing compared to what US banks are offering. And we're also talking about risk, right? So Malaysia, we are an emerging market, we have higher risk. So why not just put your money in the US dollar? It's the US government. They tend to pay back their debts, etc., etc. Okay, so that's why the US dollar has been so strong and the yen has been extremely weak. So I think that, kind of wraps up my session for tonight. I tend not to bring it over 20 or 30 minutes, keep it short and sweet. Shout out to all our patrons. Really, thank you all so much for your support. Andrew, Wendy, Edward, Alex, CC is, Morpheus, Urshad, Caveman Balls, Calvin, Kai, Tommy, Jinkang, Adrian, JS, Funyan, Dean, Duhan, Ken, Faris, Alan, Jackson, Rizan, Jeremy, G, Jeffrey, and Lawrence, as well as all of our learner members. I think we have a question from Penguin over here. What are some of the actions we can take to benefit from the yen currency being weak? Well, a lot of benefits actually. First of all, you can visit Japan at a much cheaper rate, right? I know the flight costs and the food there is getting more and more expensive, so that one is still debatable. But at the rate at which the currency is depreciating, right, it, it is probably a good opportunity to go there, have a 1 to 2 week holiday, just because on how weak the yen is against the Malaysian ringgit lah. Another thing is that the imports from Japan, right? Malaysia tends to import stuff from Japan, right? It tends to become a bit more cheaper, and you'll be able to buy more Japanese goods, hopefully, if the Malaysian government doesn't put like a price cap on it or whatnot. So yeah, those are the few benefits in terms of a weakening currency, lah, okay? But other than that, it's I guess the biggest pro is to really just go there, explore the Japanese life, and eat some sashimi or fried rice. If you're interested to hold some Japanese yen, well, I'm not the one that will give you financial advice, but Japanese yen, considering that the Central Bank of Japan is still planning to maintain interest rates as low as possible. Yeah, they have not indicated when they will start to raise interest rates above the negative territory, right? So that will probably translate into more weakness for the Japanese yen, at least for short term. Okay, because if you take a look at Malaysian central banks, yeah, Malaysia, we're probably going to keep interest rates, our OPR at 3.0% for at least for another half year or so, right? Meanwhile, the US, they have not budged also. They said that they will keep interest rates higher for longer. And since Japan, they refuse to raise interest rates, then logically, that should translate into more weakness for the Japanese yen. Okay, so hopefully that kind of answers your question, and that brings our session tonight to a close. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the session tonight, and I will see you guys in the next one. So next session, we're back to usual Sunday 10 p.m. All right, guys. Bye. Stay safe. Good night.